I think birds, especially birds of prey. Um, I worked with them a few years ago, rehabilitating them and things like that. And they taught me a lot, especially about having self-confidence, like that saying that's, I don't know if it exists in English, but it's like, birds are not afraid of the branch they are perched on breaking because they can fly. So I don't know, they taught me to have faith in myself, in my skills, in my wings, so to speak. So yeah, I feel very close to them. Nature always made me feel at home. I was always like this, the awkward child, the one that was always looking at bugs and plants and flowers. So I always felt more at home in nature than at school, for example, or even at my own home. So yeah, it's a big part of myself, of my life, I guess. I remember during the recess, while all the other kids were playing, I would come close to the trees, look at the ants that were trailing down the bark of the tree, and yeah, I was very observant of the little critters around us. When I was a child, like 6 years old or so, my father gave me a Polaroid camera. So that's kind of how I started getting into photography. But it wasn't until I was older, about 18, 19 years old, that I decided that I wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. I mean, still hasn't happened, but we're kind of like on the journey there. And I got my first camera, and which was a Canon DSLR camera, and I started photographing again my pets, my cats, and the gardens where I live, and slowly started transitioning into wildlife and bigger landscapes and things like that. So it's been a journey. I've also had to study a lot about biology, ecology, and of course conservation. But my main focus was also learning as much as I could about photography and storytelling. Nowadays, phones also are great, for starting in photography. Or I also have colleagues that make amazing images with their phones, and I'm like mind blown. So I guess mostly would be like stepping away from the vertical setup and holding your phone more in a horizontal way to get more of this panoramic shot. And it depends on the brand, but each phone has like a pro mode that you can use, and that gives you like more depth of field, close attention to your surroundings, because sometimes we think about nature and wildlife photography and think, oh, I have to go somewhere really far away to photograph, I don't know, a bear or a lion or something like that. But you can start with, flowers, plants, or again, little critters in your yard, in your park. And those photos can be really a lot more impressive sometimes than big mammals, so to speak, because you can showcase a world that we don't normally pay attention to, and especially if you're in urban settings. Yeah. And that can be a really way to get started in photography. For the longest time, my wildlife photography style was trying to get intimate portraits of these animals because I wanted my audience to connect with them, so that they could feel empathy and maybe learn to love them or at least respect them. So first, it's like I use a zoom lens. I camouflage myself when going out into the wild, and I just wait. I just wait for birds or other animals to kind of come close. And I mean, close is the same because with the zoom lens, you don't really have to get that close to animals. And I try to focus on their faces and their eyes as much as possible. But in recent times, I've started to use shorter lenses because I'm trying to capture them alongside their environment, to get the context of how they live, and that kind of helps me more in storytelling wise, because yeah, I can capture more details, the situation, especially now that I am more focused on climate change issues, environmental issues, all that. I also want to get images of the animals, their environment, their way of life, the threats that they are facing, But nowadays, well, sometimes I still focus only on their faces, especially when it comes to animals that are not very liked or very charismatic, like possums, that people don't like them because they feel they are, I don't know, big rats. So yeah, I try to capture them in the most cutesy possible way so that people stop killing them just because they're ugly, trying to shine a different light on them. So yeah, that's mostly my style. I would like people to understand that we as human beings are part of nature, of the beauty of nature, of the environment, that we are not a part of it, and that we can really coexist peacefully with wildlife, with nature. And it's just that we've forgotten because, the system, the way of life that is so focused on making money, on material things. So I would like people to reconnect with nature, with animals through my photography so that we can one day achieve a peaceful coexistence with them. First, I would advise them to really take a course or several courses in photography because sometimes, people still think that photography is just pressing a button, but it's a lot more than that. So it's something that you also have to study, something that you have to practice, like music. You cannot strive to become an amazing musician if you never practice. So photography is like the same. But also, if you're interested in wildlife and more so in conservation photography, you really have to study about the biology, ecology, and all these natural sciences aspects of nature and wildlife, because you really need to understand them, understand their habits, their behavior, where to find them, how they relate to their ecosystems, to climate change, and also to humans. So yeah, it's a lot of studying and a lot of practicing, but it's really fun, and you get to see the world in a different way. So that's priceless, I think. It teaches you also to not only notice the beauty in everyday things, but also in small details. You start noticing things you didn't notice before, like the color of light. So, for example, we think light is white, that comes from the sun or a lamp. But when you study photography, you learn that light has different colors, and you kind of like deprogram your brain to only see white light, and you start seeing all these different types of lights, all these different details here and there. You start noticing the sunset, the clouds, the sky. So you get to be more open to the beauty of our world one way or the other. So Mexico City's Wildlife is an environmental education project, so to speak, that combines photography and science. And it started around 2017 when I was coming home from another photography assignment, and I found a dead possum in my neighborhood. Sadly, the possum had been poisoned by one of my neighbors. I never found out who, but after, I calmed down after all the anger and thinking, oh, people are so mean and so cruel to animals, I understood, okay, so sometimes people can be really cruel to animals because they don't know them, they don't understand them, because most, at least here in Mexico, most of the scientific information relating to animals is not very easily available to the general population. So people are really not informed. So, and when they have access to this information, it's so complicated and it's so filled with technicalities and things like that. That people, if you don't have a scientific background, you won't understand any of it. And sadly, Mexico also still has like a very high rate of illiteracy. So I tried to think of a way of how I, as a photographer, I could combine my art with what I knew about wildlife conservation and science to bring it closer to people so that it could be more easily understandable, available, and things like that. So that's how I came up with the project. Um, it's also something that is very local. I started in my own community and have expanded towards other areas of the city, and that has allowed me um, to not spend as much resources and money on the project and to be able to grow it faster than if it was a project, I don't know, in another continent or someplace else in the world that you need a lot of funding to do. So it's been a journey, but it's also allowed me to meet many different people from, people concerned about nature in the city, people concerned about wildlife here, experts also, indigenous communities here in Mexico City that are fighting to preserve whatever is left of nature here. And also it's also helped me learn a lot more about wildlife and how resilient they are and how they have adapted to living in a big city like Mexico City. My journey started as a zoo volunteer here in Mexico City. There, I started learning a little bit, but that, I mean, it helped me to learn where to find more resources to learn more about wildlife and conservation. So, yeah, I started researching more online. Thankfully, nowadays we have like Google and all these kinds of tools that can help you expand your knowledge. But I also started meeting, colleagues, biologists, ecologists, and other experts that have been very kind and have shared their knowledge with me. They have invited me to participate in different kinds of projects. I've also taken courses relating to wildlife handling, wildlife conservation, wildlife rehabilitation, and yeah, lots of reading. I love to read, so anytime I can get my hands on a book about science, nature, I come to mama. I really devour those kinds of books. Part of the Mexico City's wildlife project is not only like making beautiful photos and exposing them or exhibiting them in the city, or it's also holding these workshops for kids at schools. So what I do is I either sometimes take the photos, in a physical format, or sometimes I take my computer and I go into the classroom. We start talking about, so kids, which animals do you know? And normally you'd notice that they will mention animals like elephants, horses, lions, dogs, cats. And it's like, okay, cool, that's great. But have you ever heard about this animal that lives here with us in the city? And I start showing them the pictures of the wildlife that resides here in the city. And it's beautiful because you would think it's know nothing about nature and science, but actually they know a lot. So it's also been a learning experience for me because, they are still so very connected to the natural world. And I think that's something that we start to lose while we get older, which is a shame. But kids are very eager to learn more about their surroundings and also how they can help. And, they start telling you all these stories like, yes, once I went to the park with my family and I saw a squirrel and I was fascinated, but my dad said it was a rat. And they start, no, but you have to teach your dad. Yes, I told my dad that animals are important part of the planet. So, yeah, they're very passionate. So it's very refreshing because also as a conservationist, I have to cover stories that are devastating, that are about ecocides or mega projects, a whole forest that was cut down to build a mall, things like that. So coming into a classroom and talking with children that are so passionate for life, it's very refreshing and hopeful also because, yeah, it's like, yes, there's hope. Children understand. So through this project, I try to encourage them to never lose this connection to nature. And but it's also been challenging because working with children, they have a lot of energy. They are always asking questions. They are moving around a lot. They always want to play. Their mind goes like 1,000 miles per hour, and sometimes it's like, whoa, give me a second to breathe. So yeah, it can be overwhelming, but it's I don't know, it's also energizing one way or the other because I get to play with them and be a kid again myself. So it's beautiful. I learned that the apathy that most people feel towards the planet, how as environmentalists we say, well, it's just hard because the general population doesn't care about the planet. It's not that they don't care, it's that nobody's teaching them to see what's happening. So after these workshops, either with only the kids, their teachers, or sometimes parents are also present, you see how people do care. People do want to do something. They just don't know how. So if you point them in the right direction, you will see how people are really motivated and inspired to actually do something, especially parents, because they really want their kids to have a future. They just have never been taught how to guarantee this future for their children. So what I've learned is that as a global community of scientists, conservationists, etc., we have made a huge mistake during the last decades of not including the general population in scientific and environmental endeavors. And I've learned that without our local communities, without including people, in planting trees, picking up trash, any kind of endeavor that you wish to achieve that is positive towards the planet, if you don't include the people, you're not going to get results. That's why we haven't gotten the results that we wanted since the environmental movement started in the 70s, because it mostly pertained to the scientific community. And yeah, we are still in time to correct this mistake, because people do want to learn. People do want to put their hands in the ground and plant a tree and do something for the planet. They just need guidance. I guess one of the species that I've had the fortune to raise awareness for was the vultures, the griffin vulture. That, I mean, it's not related to Mexico at all, but in 2018 I was in Europe and I got the chance to photograph this species, and thankfully it won a prize by National Geographic. So that photo has like kind of circulated the whole world, and it's been great because vultures are also one of those species that people hate just because they are ugly, because they are always covered in blood. I don't know. But again, because of my style of photography that tries to make animals look as beautiful as possible, a lot of people still don't believe me that the bird on my photo is a vulture. They say, no, but it can't be a vulture. Vultures are ugly and this bird is beautiful. And, I try to be patient and be like, vultures are beautiful. You just have to learn to see them in a different light. So that photo has helped me raise awareness about how important these animals are for the ecosystem, but also that they deserve to live because they are living beings and they deserve our respect. And yeah, so that's been great. And I think that showcases the power of photography, how images can really change people's minds regarding different kind of situations and contexts. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is tough. Okay, so for me, one of the most beautiful sceneries has been a wetland here in Mexico City that it's called Xochimilco. So Xochimilco is known globally as a place to party while you are on a boat, cruising the canals of the wetland, which is kind of like a Mexican Venice. However, this wetland is of international importance because of how it not only provides water for one of the largest cities in the world, but also as an ally to combat climate change. And I've had the fortune to be able to photograph the unknown part of this wetland, the natural part, not the touristic part. So the sceneries here are just beautiful, especially at sunrise, because it's filled with birds, especially during the winter months. It's filled with fog, that gives it like this kind of mystic kind of feeling to the place. And in the background, you can see two of the most iconic volcanoes in Mexico, the Iztaccíhuatl and the Popocatépetl. So it kind of throws you back to when the Mexica Empire still existed and they coexisted with nature, and before the conquista from Spain and all that, it kind of gives you this feeling. So it's been beautiful because at sunrise it's filled with these golden and pink hues, and with the fog and the birds flying everywhere. And even if it's part of Mexico City, you feel like you are not in Mexico City, that you are someplace far away. The only sounds you can hear are those of the birds, of the water, and the smells are all very different. And the scenery is just so peaceful, so beautiful, and it really transmits something, especially when looking at the volcanoes. It makes you feel small, like you're just a small human being, part of something larger, something a lot more important. This fills me with hope, like this is what we're fighting for. This cannot disappear, and this is what we need to reclaim and to put all of our efforts into, to this beauty, to this scenery, to this life. So yeah, that's one of my most favorite places to be. I found unexpected beauty in spiders. So for the longest time, yeah, I used to be very afraid of spiders. I don't know why. I just suddenly started being afraid of spiders. But when I started doing also macro photography, to again capture the beauty of small animals, small critters, I was very reluctant about getting closer to spiders because of my fear. But I was like, no, okay, you have to do this. Let's go. So I started getting getting closer first to the little jumping spiders, that are like also very popular like on the internet. And yeah, I started looking at them, their big eyes, how they look into the camera and then are very curious, how they move all their legs and things like that. And I found them to be really, really cute. And then I started looking into other spiders that seemed scary, but when I looked at them through the macro lens and I could see them like amplified, they actually have very cute faces. Like, I mean, I know they have a ton of eyes, but they're like really big and they're very curious and they're like just standing there looking at you, moving their jaws and their paws, and they're like, okay, spiders are pretty. I was wrong. And that's actually helped me get over my fear of them. So, yeah. I guess one of the solutions would be as part of, as you say, as part of groups that have had access to nature and education and all that, I think we do have kind of a responsibility to either pressure politicians or authorities in our communities, or to organize ourselves and bring these kinds of projects like Mexico City's Wildlife or other kind of projects that are about maybe restoring nature in cities to the communities that don't have all this access. So, for example, here in Mexico City, something really curious but also horrible happens is that only wealthy neighborhoods have access to nature. Only in either upper class or middle class neighborhoods you have parks, you have a lot of trees and all that. But in areas, especially around the city, the peripheral part where it's low income families, everything's concrete. Everything is concrete. So hopefully there are new projects that I've had the chance to cover their stories that are being created by the younger generations. And they are trying to bring nature to these neighborhoods. So they are planting trees, they are making pollinator gardens, they are just, restoring neighborhood parks with nature. So, yeah, as part of people that have had access to nature, I think we do have the responsibility of either creating local projects or pressuring authorities to bring nature back to these minorities, because we've all seen the power protests hold. Again, journalism also can pressure decision makers to really bring these resources to those that need it. But also, as a society, we can organize ourselves and also use our resources or crowdfund or ask for donations or things like that to, just plant some trees somewhere there are no more trees to be found anymore, and we can slowly start to reverse these realities. I think that would be a good way to start. The biggest lesson that nature has taught me has been to be patient with myself. In this world that teaches us urgency, that you have to be producing things and always moving, nature has taught me to slow down, to just, go back to my roots, to feel, to rest even. I still forget sometimes, but yeah, like try to rest. And I actually saw this quote the other day on social media that said that nothing in nature blooms throughout the whole year. So we shouldn't expect ourselves to be blooming, throughout the whole year also. Like we have a right to just stop and rest and regroup and just be, So I guess, I mean, still trying to put it into practice because, yeah, I'm also kind of a workaholic, but getting there, trying to listen to Mother Nature. Yeah. Being outside in nature with, with the fresh air, taking a deep breath, it fills your body with air, with freshness. And by grounding myself, I guess, because you listen to this like in meditation practices and even, therapy and all that, but I don't think you really put it into practice until you go outside, even if to your yard or someplace, the park, and you just stay there, and you feel how you ground yourself, like you are untouched with the ground, with the grass, with the trees, with the birds. And yeah, I mean, it helps me recharge, because again, it shows me that I'm part of a bigger world, that whatever is going on in my personal life is nothing compared to what the planet is. So that gives me a lot more energy, like, yeah, just being there. My happy place in nature. I guess I don't have like a specific place. I mean, I love this wetlands, Xochimilco in Mexico City, but any place I can be surrounded by trees, flowers, birds, especially birds. That's gonna be my happy place. I can just sit there on the ground for hours and just look at them, jumping from branch to branch and listening them to chip 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 and all that. And yeah. No, I think it's deeply personal. Yeah. I mean, surely we have been taught what things are beautiful, like roses or exotic flowers, things like that. But in the end, I think it comes down to oneself. Just as I've learned, some people find possums ugly, some people do find them cute, and I guess it's the same for everything. So yeah, I think it depends on each person. Okay, great question. So, to make a photo of something unexpectedly beautiful, especially if you're in an urban setting, I would suggest you focus on the little things, like the little textures on leaves, on trees, even on the ground, because that's where you will find these patterns, these colors, these even like tiny, tiny, tiny flowers that you don't see like with the naked eye, or maybe tiny critters. And it's going to teach you also to see the world in a very different way, and to focus on these very small details that make the whole world beautiful. So yeah, I would suggest focus on little things and open your eyes to details.